Good morning, good evening, and hello to all of our ball watchers out there. We are back. This is Ball Watching, a St. Louis City SC podcast. I am Jake, joined by co-host on my right, Justin. It is a lovely, lovely week to be in St. Louis, enjoying this weather off the back of the Saharan. That is what it felt like last week, but really, really enjoying it now. I feel like fall's coming, but it's going to be 100 next week, so I'm not going to get too far ahead here, but Wednesday should be a nice little night here in City Park, and we're here to preview that game. So, Justin, how are you feeling this week? I know it's been a whirlwind for you last couple of days.
Yeah, me personally, I'm feeling a little tired, but I'm feeling good about City. Like we talked about, it was an upbeat game down in Orlando. Wasn't expecting a dub there, being such heavy underdogs, but coming home against a team that, yes, FC Dallas is in a playoff spot right now, but a team that we should be able to handle, especially knowing having a couple of our guys come back. So I'm excited to preview it.
I am too. There's a lot of good news around the club right now. I feel like with people coming back from injuries, you've got the team obviously looking pretty good at the top of the West. You've got City 2 as well, rattling off some nice wins. So it's good time to be a St. Louis City fan. But before we get too far into this, Justin, I just want to do a quick kind of touch base on the Orlando game. Obviously, we lost 2-1 on the weekend to Orlando away from home. I think generally it might feel like a little bit of a bitter loss because of the nature of losing that game and the way that we did, conceding the handball and the PK very, very late in the game. And again, you go back to the late goals and, wanting to really close that up and really close up shop towards the end of games. And that's something that we need to get doing if we're going to go anywhere here in the playoffs or towards even the end of the season with our final run of games. But honestly, you look at the big picture, like zoom out, it's still a 4-point gap at the top of the Western Conference. And that doesn't feel comfortable still. I'm happy that we have that, but it's, you still got some teams in the West that, I think some points have been dropped recently, but ultimately these are teams that strengthened and I think are going to be looking to really push us to the end of the season. And, for us, it's about trying to broaden that gap or just maintain it wherever you can. So I think they're looking at tomorrow, being Wednesday here against FC Dallas at home, is a game that you really, really want to win to broaden that gap and just keep it.
Yeah, we can't be sliding in and just trying to cruise to the end of this finish line. So I think one of the things, I think MLS might have tweeted it, between the third place Seattle team with 37 points and the 10th place Minnesota team with 32 points. That's a 5-point gap all the way to knock you from having home field advantage to not being in the playoffs whatsoever. So
Right.
Yes, we have a little bit of a cushion there being 7 points up on Seattle, but there's still plenty of games to be played. So it's one of those things that we got to take care of business when we can. And I do want to give a quick shout out, like you said, quick shout out to City too. They're taking care of business. They are now in playoff contention. They are the 7th spot in the Western Conference for the MLS Next Pro. Just took down the Earthquakes 2 after giving up a PK in the 23rd and then scoring in the 62nd, 70th, and 71st minutes. 2 goals by Caden Glover there. Celio got some minutes as well. So I'm happy to see them boys making a push, and shout out to Johnny Klein and AJ Palazzolo. Keep it going.
Absolutely. So other news around the club. So power rankings came out only for ESPN this time. MLS didn't redo it. Yeah, just because the games are just coming hot and heavy right now. Obviously, there's a weekend and a midweek really going on. But ESPN kept us at 5 for this week, which I think is fair. I don't think that Orlando loss says a whole lot about the team as much as it just kind of highlights some of our weaknesses. And you're just on the wrong side of some of those calls, as well as you just didn't have your best stuff offensively that night. But otherwise, for me, I'm happy about the injury news coming out. Gioacchini, obviously, we saw him exit with a shoulder injury on Saturday. Fortunately, it looks like that was not serious. They're looking at having him at least as a game time decision maybe this week. I don't see Carnell pushing him into the 11 if we have the type of depth that we have right now, especially if he's feeling any sort bit of pain from that shoulder. That's just not something you want to aggravate at all. I know it's weird, like a shoulder injury on a primarily leg foot sport feels weird, but that does impact him a lot. I mean, think about how much you use your arms for jumping and for sprinting. So definitely want to take it easy there. But also Klaus, we did get a little bit of a look behind the curtain on the Klaus saga. I still need a heck of a lot more to understand what really transpired these last 4 months. But there was an article, a piece that Tom Timmerman put out for the Post-Dispatch. And I think what I got from that was the mentality and what Klaus was going through as a human. I don't want to put much of, if any of this onto him. I wonder, how he, handled that rehab and how seriously, certain people take that. I'm sure he did take it very seriously, because you look at an injury like his, and this was interesting, Justin. So the difference between the injury to Leuven and Klaus wasn't really made clear until right now, where we both heard it was quad for both of them. But they called Leuven's a quad kind of muscle injury, and they called Klaus's a tendon injury, which are a little bit more sneaky and hard to know if you've actually, regained health. And that is, I think, why they kind of maybe mistreated it in the very beginning, and they got false alarms that he was back and ready to go, when those tendons take much, much longer to heal. So I don't know if you read that or if you had any thoughts on that, but it was an interesting kind of tale into the differences in certain types of injuries.
No, I think that is it, Jake. I think it being a muscle injury compared to a tendon is completely different in how you're rehabbing it, and nothing to the team. I think it's just one of those, you assume they're probably similar, but then did you see, he said he was doing like MRIs, like pretty much like every other day or weekly, like just trying to get an idea of what was going on inside of there. So for him, it's got to be the most frustrating thing. That man wants to be on the field. He does not want his mother to cry. And I feel like she's probably been sad that he hasn't played in, 19 straight games. So happy to see him back on the field. Yes, he only got 15 minutes or so.
Right.
I would like to see what he's going to be coming in and doing on Wednesday. I don't think he'll start, but I do think that he'll get some good minutes. And I think about just getting his legs back under him physically and mentally, and just kind of turning that around.
Yeah, I don't think he starts in either game this week, personally. I just think he's still getting up to fitness, and you don't just make that jump, especially after an injury that's sidelined you for 4 months for the better part of the season. That's half the season. 19 games is half the season. So, I mean, it's going to be something I think they take their time on, but he's now, I think, a great tool in the shed in terms of off the bench for now, until he can regain that match fitness. So you're hoping to probably have him, regain that full fitness probably with about 6 or 5 games left in the season, so he can be there for that final run of games. But it was really hard on him, obviously. And that's kind of the perspective that I got to get from that article was, obviously he was quoted here. It wasn't easy for me. It was a really tough couple of months. By the end of the day, I'm just a human like everyone else, and I just had to wait. So just one of those things that nature kind of had to just take its course. But he's not an injury-prone guy typically in his career. That was the thing. One of the shocking things is he said he hadn't been injured since the age of 10. So I don't know if that's true in terms of his past club situations or how long he's been out. That's really impressive if that's the case. And unfortunate for us that we had to be the first one for him to do that. But hopefully that is in the past now, and we move on. And we're moving on to Dallas on Wednesday evening. Dallas, you might remember them from a past episode that we had, a past couple of episodes that we had to do on them here because of the stupid storm in Dallas, where we had to play like the whole first half, part of the second half, come home because it was postponed, and then fly back down for the rest of the second half, which was the most asinine thing that I've ever seen in professional sports. But Dallas is a good team. Historically, they began play in 1996 as one of the charter clubs of the league. They've got a one-time supporter shield, and they got 2 U.S. Open Cups. No MLS Cup currently in their locker. They returned last year to playoffs in style. They ended up losing out to Austin, who ironically they just beat on the weekend. But they're a pretty solid team. I don't think they're looking the same as they were last year during this year. They've got a little bit of offensive lapse going on right now, but defensively is where they've really popped up. So we'll get to that here. But they've got some STL connections. Justin, you located a great one. I'm glad you found this.
Yeah, it was a little bit. This was not an easy one to find. I'm glad you added the second one as well, because I completely forgot about this. So, and there are 2 connections in almost opposite ways. So Isaiah Parker was born in Gurnee, Illinois. Following his freshman year at SLU in 2021, when they made an NCAA quarterfinal run, he signed a Generation Adidas contract and was selected 3rd overall in the draft by FC Dallas. He's on loan with San Antonio FC this season. Doesn't seem like he's getting a whole lot of time. I was surprised that he left SLU so quickly as a freshman. That's not something you would typically see, but I mean, taking 3rd overall, I guess there is something that I was not 100% seeing in following the SLU team. And then on the flip side, we got Lucas Bartlett, who's from Overland Park, Kansas. He was actually being drafted 6th overall in 2022 draft by FC Dallas. And then we took him on trial and signed him after FC Dallas declined their option with him, which is an absurd thing for me, of taking these guys in the top 10 and then not even letting them have a chance to pan out. Because I mean, obviously Lucas still has plenty that he can show us, and he's been doing a great job for us throughout the season. I think he's running into the problem now of we have a ton of center backs, but it does not mean that he's not been a great asset for us.
No, I would agree. It's crazy. They feel so different in age and profile, but they were drafted in the same draft. Isaiah Parker was third, and Bartlett was sixth. And we say STL connections. I want to make sure we're not saying these people are from St. Louis. I know Gurney isn't even close to St. Louis, and obviously neither is Overland Park, but they both came into St. Louis and they both had an impact here in the game and probably served as like a jumping point for their career. Obviously Parker did, but SLU significantly raised his profile. And then Bartlett, of course, kind of revitalizing his career that was kind of cut short a little bit by Dallas and declining his options. So happy for them both and happy to find those connections running throughout here. But 2023 so far, have you played Dallas yet? Yes. Obviously, we have. This is our second leg. We're coming home. Yeah, twice now. It's brutal. Both away. And like we said, that the storm had caused the delay and the postponement that led to us going back down on June 7th, and we suffered a 2-0 loss with both goals coming in the 80 to 90 minutes, man. We keep talking about it and talking about it. It's one of my least favorite, I think, games of the year to look back on. I know Nate Lucas, the verdict on 590 would probably agree with us. Just like we said, the craziest thing that we had to go down there and do that again and lose and then fly back home after 42 minutes of gameplay. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And I mean, it is one of those things. This was so long ago, Jake. It's hard for us to really touch on. And it's such a weird one. I don't blame the guys for going. We talked about it in the recap on that. I don't blame them for going down there and losing that game, unfortunately. But it did began a 4-game skid for us with just 1 point collected. We tied LA Galaxy and then lost to Nashville and Real Salt Lake. So definitely a little tough one on the boys mentally, I think, in that little time. But what has happened since? Dallas has only won twice in the MLS. LAFC and Austin in the last game after our game back in June 7th, which is what? Are we pushing? That's 2.5 months ago. We're coming up on 3 months. Yeah. That's absurd. They did make a run in Leagues Cup and then lost to Messi and friends and PKs in the round of 16. But MLS-wise, they have not been doing that hot.
They haven't. And we'll get to their offense versus defense. And I just think it's an interesting story because it used to be, I feel like, the opposite. But record standings so far this year for them, like we said, it's been kind of a meh year for them. 33 points, which gets them to 8th in the West. So right basically on that cusp of playoffs in the wild card kind of spot too. So they got a 9-9-6 win-loss draw record. Home record, pretty solid, 7-3-2, but away record, 2-6-4. And we're going to get to this inverse relationship here in a second with goals for 26, which is so we have double their goals basically with 50. And that's 24th in the MLS with 26 goals. That's brutal. Only one of them being outside the 18, which we'll get to in our stats, which I pull that in, Justin, too. But goals against is the interesting story, too, because they have a goal differential of 0. So they scored 26. They also conceded 26, which is the best in the MLS. So offense, really not humming along at all. But defense, churning out defensive masterpieces night after night. So a very kind of tale of inverses here. Like what it's like Jekyll and Hyde. Like their offense is brutal when it hasn't been in the history. I feel like it's been pretty strong and free flowing, but defense has been really solid for them and probably a reason why they're still hanging around in the playoff picture.
I mean, it's going to be a great clash because we are the first in the MLS, tied for first in the MLS with 50 goals, and they are first with goals against of only 26. So we got to see who's going to win there. I like our odds, and we'll talk about that specifically on the odds later. Key results you should know for Dallas just throughout the year. We try to pull in about 5 games, usually 4 of the teams that are like top tier, either East or West, and then their most recent game. They lost at Nashville 2-0. They beat Real Salt Lake at home 2-1. Tied Seattle at Seattle 1-1 earlier this year. And then they also beat LAFC at home 2-0. And then their most recent game, which we talked about, was a win against Austin. And they scored in the 90th plus 7 minutes to get a 1-0 dub.
Yeah, and we didn't put any Leagues Cup in there because we're not doing that. But they actually, like you said, did make a pretty good run at the Leagues Cup. That's one of their better showings they've had recently. If you put MLS aside, they beat a couple solid Mexican teams. But magic number, Justin, let's kind of give the breakdown for Dallas. Things are obviously looking a little bit bleak. They have a lot of work to do to solidify their spot.
Yep, absolutely. So they have 33 points, puts them in the 8th. So as of right now, they are in a playoff spot, technically the wild card spot. Their current points per match is 1.38 with 10 games remaining. So if you think about it that way, their projected points the rest of the season, if they hold their form right now, is only 14 points. Now, how does that fit into their magic number? If they want home field advantage, so having the 4th spot or higher, they need at least 17 points, which is more than what they're projected right now. If they want to have home field or have round 1 without home field, so the 7th spot, they would need 16 points higher than what they're projected right now. And then obviously we talked about it, the wild card spot. they would need 14 points, which is basically just doing what they have done. So if they continue their points per game route for the rest of the season, they're just going to be sliding into a wild card spot and possibly getting bounced early. So I would say this is not good for them, considering this is one. I'm going to try to think about how to work this in for us as well, Jake. I was looking at their games upcoming, and I'm going to try to work this into what are those teams' points per match, or where do they sit? Their next 7 games are against playoff teams, 8 if you include us. Yeah. So like they are likely not holding this pace that they've already done. And then they finish strong with 3 teams that's like LA Galaxy, Kansas City. So teams that are lower on the table. But these next 7 games, they could be done early.
That's interesting. I mean, because you look at some of the players they have and you wonder why this is happening, because they have one of the best, I'd say, MLS strikers in the league. So Jesus Ferreira is 22-year-old American. Everyone should know him from watching him for the national team and some of his limited caps and goals that he has. He's got 18 caps, 8 goals in the national team. Probably getting up there in terms of market value, close to about the 10 million range. You always hear talk about him maybe making the move overseas, which I know he wants to do at some point. He's got 10 goals this season, all of them being inside the 18. He missed last week with an illness. But next, I mean, after that, I mean, the goal scoring weight falls onto his shoulders almost entirely, because the next couple of guys below him are at 3 and 2 respectively. So it's just a burden a cross that he has to bear, but he does so willingly for them, and he actually does provide when they need him to. But the interesting one I want to call out here, Justin, is this Alan Velasco guy. We talked about him earlier in the last preview and recap, and I don't think we've seen the best of him yet. He's a 20-year-old Argentinian. Again, pretty much in parity with market value, about 8 mil right now, and came from Argentina last year. He's only got 2 goals and 3 assists so far this year, but he was the guy that was supposed to bring their offensive tick into the game, whether that's as a 10, as a winger, as a second striker with Ferreira, and he hasn't lived up to it so far. And I've read some FC Dallas pieces on this to understand why, and I think it's largely because there's some disagreement on where he should play. And I've heard that when he plays in the number 10, centrally, sitting underneath Ferreira and in the wingers, he's able to play his best game. But when he's positioned out wide or as an 8 in the midfield, that's not when you get the best from him. So it'll be interesting to see if they adapt how he plays and actually sits into the starting 11 for them.
Yeah, and I was going to say, like, is it a minutes thing? Like, is he not getting time? Like, no, he has over 150 more minutes than Ferreira does. He's played in 21 games, started 20 of them. So the man's getting time. He's just not producing. So it has to be a positional thing. So that's interesting. And then one thing I want to touch on, Jake, we usually talk about like the high-powered offense on some of these teams. I wanted to bring in Marco Farfan. He is a 24-year-old left-footed homegrown player who's only 5'10", 160 pounds, but he is their left back. And so when we talk about this defense, he is one of their anchors, I would say. He's started 22 of the 23 games he's played in, and he leads the team in minutes. So when you talk about these clean sheets and only giving up 26 goals, this guy is definitely a strong piece of that for them.
And they have some other honorable mentions on the team in terms of some name brands, but Paxton Pomykal rings a bell for, I'm sure, some of you. He's been a U.S. prospect for a while, hasn't really lived up to all the hype. You'll probably see him in the midfield trio for this game, or somewhere in the midfield. Sebastian Ibiaga is one of their better center backs. They also have another center back, Tafari, that was making the matchday team of the week last week for his late goal against Austin that led to them winning. He's making a big push. Martin Pace is their goalkeeper. He's got 6 clean sheets so far this season, but they made some acquisitions over the transfer window. They brought in 3 players, but the only one I really want to focus on is just because of the name brand, not necessarily his name, but the brand that he brings with him, and that is a number 6 or a central defensive midfielder they brought in named Asier Ilaramendi, and they brought him in to kind of bolster their central defensive midfield position. And he's 33 years old, Spanish international. And the 2 teams that he's played for before this are Real Sociedad, which is where he's coming from as a free transfer, and Real Madrid. He was on Real for a couple of years and was also on the team when they won the Champions League in 2014. So a guy that you're bringing, a Champions League winner player, to your team. We'll see how big of an impact he makes. He got some minutes in our last game. I think that was his first game where he actually made the bench for them due to all the transfer stuff you have to go through and hoops and things to get through. But interesting to make a caliber player that signing. I think he's only got the rest of this year and an option for next year. Obviously, he's 33, so we'll see how much legs he's got left in him.
I was about to say that seems a little bit more like a locker room guy,
Yeah.
and can just pick up these guys and kind of try to lead them to the promised land of trying to make the playoffs, being 33 years old. But still a good signing for the MLS. I think bringing some of these guys over. Jake, if we want to talk about style real quick, I'll hop us in here with the head coach, Nico Estevez, Spanish manager, has experience in some of the lower levels of Spain in an interim role with Valencia, only under Rafa Benitez. And he's also one of Greg's guys. I feel like we have a Greg's guy just about every episode. He was an assistant for the U.S. men's national team from 2019 to 2021, and FC Dallas hired him in December of 21.
Yeah, and he usually deploys a pretty fluid 4-3-3. He's a coach that some call him kind of galaxy braining a little bit, the way his players need to play. But every position in that 4-3-3, he has a very specific type of profile and expectation set for. It's not so much, let's put in the best players and see what they can do for us. For him, as let's put the players that fit the positions the best and let's have them play within those. And that can be good and that can be bad for them. When they have the right players, that system works great. They can be inventive, they can be creative, decisive. We saw that in Leagues Cup. When they're not up to their best or when they don't have the right players, that can kind of break down. And that it's the machine that they need to operate and generate chances on, because they're a team that can sit back in their own third, their own half, dominate the ball, possess, knock it around back there. But really, they're trying to make it very hard to concede on counters and limit your chances that you get while they look to hit you on the counter going forward. They have really pacey wingers, and they can be really big in transition. But this is a team, like we said, that defensively, they look up to the task. They do not concede that much. Obviously, the least amount of goals in the MLS, but they're not known for that necessarily either. So I think they just limit the errors they make, and they make you bring the game to them. So it'll be a very interesting matchup for City, as I feel like we kind of have a little bit of that shared profile. Not the same defense right now, but offensively, that's kind of a similar tactic I think we use against teams that do like to possess.
I would agree with that. And I think as that kind of leads us into trends and storylines with them, I think in general, just a quick history on them. They lost to Austin in the Western Conference semifinals in 2022. So trying to improve upon that as they're kind of teeter-tottering on that playoff line right now. Some of their strengths you already talked about with their pacey forwards, just through ball chances. And then obviously, I think both of these next 2 points are pretty specific to their defenses. They're good on coming back when they're down, which is very rare considering they only give up 26 goals. And they're good at protecting leads, which is easy when you only give up 26 goals as well. They're 14th in MLS power rankings. The most recent one we know, we said that's about almost a week ago at this point, just because of the amount of games coming out. But their last 5 away games, loss, draw, 50% loss rate away in 2023, with only 0.83 points per match away, with a goal differential of -7. And we talked about their points per match right now on the season is 1.38. So they're getting half a point less on their road games because of how poor they've been playing.
Yeah, and this will be interesting. So let's go into the offense, look at this team, because it's just going to be, like I said, Jekyll and Hyde. Look at the offense and the defense. So offensively, XG right now is 1.12 per 90. That is 26th in the MLS. So they're, third last, which is crazy. Average about 1.08 goals for per game. So slightly underperforming their XG, but still that makes them marginally better in terms of actual product at about number 22 in the MLS. So averaging 1.08 goals for per game. When you look at away, it gets a little bit worse in XG, but not, crazy. But when you look at the actual product, only 9 of their 26 goals have been scored away from home. So they haven't even broken double digits yet. I'm pretty sure we did that in the first probably 10 games of the season because we were just crushing it away. So it's very, very different look for this team. And Justin, I'm going to put the hammer down. This is going to suck for us, but almost a third of those goals they're scoring, even away, and we're considering home here as well, are in that 81 to 90 minutes. So they are a team that can wait for it. They just did it against Austin. It was a heartbreaking loss for Austin. Otherwise, they're mostly, I think, skewing towards second half goal product. About 20% come from the 51st to 60th, but usually second half is where they look to come alive.
Yeah, but I'm still not overly concerned with that because when you say they come alive, they still only have 26 goals. So it is something to note that if they are more likely to score, it's likely in second half. We'll talk about that in bets later, but I'm still not overly concerned with these guys as they're scoring 120 minutes, it takes 120 minutes per goal for them, which is just absolutely absurd. I think we're pushing like 35 minutes is something dumb. 25 of their 26 goals are inside of the 18, 5 of them being headers, and only 1 outside of the 18. I think that speaks a lot of volumes on Jesus Ferreira and getting in between guys and all 10 of his goals being inside the 18. Yep. They're top 10 in goal creating actions from take-ons, highest successful take-on percentage of 56.6% in the MLS as well. So even though they're not scoring that much, they are creating chances.
They are, and it comes usually in those individual moments, which is what those take-ons kind of tell you. They have the fourth least shots on target so far in the MLS, and they also average, this is interesting, Justin, the fourth least distance per shot, which I think, is an ode back to what we just talked about with goals not coming much outside the 18 for them. They really look for those quality chances inside the box. They're not a heavy possession team, average about 48% on the road, bottom 10 in total passes. We are number one in the least amount of passes, which is hilarious. And the most of their touches usually come in the defensive third side. So like I said, very comfortable possessing in their own side of the field. They have the second least amount of corner kicks in the league and the fourth least amount of crosses. So this isn't a team that's looking to swing, out swingers, in swingers, and look for headers in. This is a team that's looking to create chances, probably more centrally, and try to put them away. So defensively is where we kind of turn the tide here. Defensively, they have an expected goals against of 1.42 per 90, which in itself is about average when you look at the entire MLS. But the actual end product, so goals against per game, is 1.08, which is number 4 in the MLS. So really interesting tale for them. Obviously, that expected goals against grows a little bit in the away games. They shift down to number 20 when you look at that, and they've conceded 16 of their 26 goals on the road. So a good chunk of them have been scored when they've been traveling. And finally, the timing of these goals is interesting too, because about a third of their goals against are coming in those final 15 minutes of the first half, which I feel like we've demonstrated a competency in that area, and 20% of them coming right after the first half. So 46 to 60. So either side of the half is a very dangerous defensive time for this team. And the second half more generally after that. So that's something that City's gonna be aware of, is like, kill them at the half, kill them right after half, and just stick goals in them, because that's when they hurt the most. It's almost like the game restarts and the game kind of shifting to the end of the halftime, or you can really hurt this team.
I was kind of surprised. So they concede every 68 minutes, which does not surprise me. But this note that you have in here, that they're tied for the most own goals in the MLS of 3, which only giving up 20. That means they've only given up 23 goals to their actual opposition, which is impressive. They're top 10 in save percentage with 72.8%, and number 4 in saves, and only 25% of
clean sheets.
You got to spell these out, Jake. You get lazy with me on this. And only 25% clean sheets. That's the bottom 10. I think they have a total of 6 in all of their games, if I remember correctly. And then I'll let you take us to this post-shot XG minus goals against. They're a plus 0.01. Which I feel like we usually see a lot of guys that are negative. I know Berkey's still like a plus 6.
Yep, plus 6.7. So he's effectively prevented about 6 to 7 goals so far this season, which I think is understating it for sure. But theirs is basically about average. Very average goalkeeping coming out of Dallas. But keys to the game, Justin. Let's talk about them. So generally, home and away form. City is 9-3-1. Dallas, so that was at home for City. At Dallas away is 2-6-4. I think we already mentioned that. But last 5 overall, very different tales too. I mean, last 5 overall for us is win, loss, loss, win, loss. This is also considering Leagues Cup. FC Dallas is win, loss, loss, draw, win. So both teams kind of coming in on decent form overall when you look at it, but home field advantage, man, it makes a difference. We almost have a 30% home field advantage. And you wonder how that's calculated. It's literally just the difference between our home points per match, which is 2.15, versus our away points per match, which is 1.33. So that City Park advantage is real, and we have one of the better ones in the MLS.
And I think we're going to need to use that as we touch on keys to the game for offenses. Don't get frustrated. I think that's a great idea that you have in here, is like, let them possess and let them, if they want us to try to come to them, that's okay. We don't need to be overly too excited and be sprinting right at them, but we do need to use our press. Think about it. We don't need to be sprinting the entire time, but use it wisely. And when one person goes, we all go. So use that press to make sure that their defense makes mistakes. I'm not opposed to us taking a couple of long shots here with Leuven, possibly a dinner in. We'll talk about who's starting in this game, but I think we do that and we follow it up and try to maybe even get a cleanup goal there. That's fine with me. And then end it in the first half. FC Dallas has allowed 9 goals against in the first half and only won one first half this season. And we know how good we are in the first half. City's second best in the first half in the league, only 1 loss ever. FC Dallas is third worst. So if we can get out and it's going to be a beautiful night in St. Louis. People are going to be rocking. It's been a bit since we've had a home game again. And so I think it's going to be great now that we're having a lot of these guys that have had some injury problems coming back, and I think we just got to take it to them early.
Yep. And defensively, I know we don't have as stout of a defense as they do, but I think, with now the first potential ever pairing between Nilsson and Parker, I'm salivating at that. That is going to be amazing to watch for the first time. You got to shut down Jesus Ferreira. If he's going to play, I know he had the illness last week. I assume he'll be ready for this one. But whether that's Blum in tandem with the center back pairing or one of the center backs really takes an eye on him, I love looking at the side of how Nilsson was playing so tight on their forwards in Orlando last week. And I really hope to see that same exact thing here because Ferreira is not a big guy. He's not very physical. If you can stay on him and frustrate him and keep him with his back to your goal, that's the way to best play Ferreira. If you get him spinning and turning and running in behind, that's when you run into issues. So play tight on him. Do not let him turn. I think we should let them shoot from long all day. They have one goal from out to the 18 this whole season. So take away the box, pack the box in when you need to. I know that's not sexy, but you can do that. This team is that's where they find their bread and butter goals. So shut that down from them. And also shut them down in the second half. That's when they're most efficient in terms of goals for. 18 of their 26 goals have come in the second half. So you've got to be really clicked in and engaged all second half because this is a team, like I said, they're going to play in transition. They're going to sit back a little bit and they're going to hit you as soon as you least expect it or when you have a transition moment and you turn the ball over. So it's going to be a really interesting game, I think. Like you said, Justin, the best tie for the best offensive output and then the best defensive output. So I'm really, really excited to see how this goes. I'm honestly I don't know what to expect on what's going to actually happen and transpire on the field. We're going to talk about that here in a second, but who is going to be on the field, Justin? What are your thoughts here?
We'll go with it here. The last thing I'm going to say real quick, Jake, is we made a kind of a joke about it, but I think this may be the most important game to not ball watch, knowing that they have the shortest length and shots in the MLS. All of their goals except for one have come inside the 18. That's going to be a lot of ticky-tacky, letting guys spin off. So making sure you're staying with your man. And quick, before we get into the starting 11, if you're pulling these up, I'm going to plug socials. If you're on here, if you're watching us live, if you're watching this on YouTube, go down, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you're listening to us, download the episodes, Apple, Spotify, leave us a review, comments. We love it all. Reach out to us. We love when we hear from you guys. Quick plugs on the actual ones too as well. Series 6, you can get 15% off at series6company.com. A ton of St. Louis gear. Like you said, I think one of my favorite ones that just came out was from the zoo. I think I need to go get that shirt. And then Soul Juice on souljuice.com. You can get 20% off of Soul Juice with our buddy Luis. And then get to the pitch tomorrow night. If you're going to be listening to this 2 nights on Wednesday night. It's going to be a beautiful night in St. Louis. It's catty corner of the stadium. They are refunding your parking. So if you're worried about parking, you can park behind Maggie O's. There's a lot back there, and then they will actually validate your parking. So that's free for you as well if you go in and just get a beer or even just some food from them. So hop in there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So pivoting us back here into the last leg of the show here, we're going to talk starting 11. We have the visual up here for anyone that's watching here on YouTube or the stream, but my 11, and I was excited making this, my 11 is going to be Berkey, obviously, in net, and the new and improved back four I'm throwing Anthony Markinick in. I'm starting him at left back. I know we've seen such a small sample size from him, but I liked what I saw, and I think it's about time we experiment more with a dynamic type fullback because I think Watts is the same. So I'm starting Watts on the right, Markinick on the left, and then I'm putting Nilsson and Parker together in the center back pairing. And I think looking at that defense, you have a mix of veteran experience and young, youthful talent and exuberance that can drive you up and down the field. So I'm really excited about this back four.
I would agree with that. I was a little hesitant when I saw that you put Anthony in there because he's only been with the team for 2 or 3 weeks or whatever. But I mean, I think for this game, this is the one to try it with, especially with the speed of Herrera. And so just making sure that he can stay with him, I think it suits him a little bit better than it does Hebert. So I'm okay with that. And then, I mean, this triangle that we're going to have, and I think we're going to see this triangle for the majority of the remainder of the season with Blum and Edu, and then in front of them having AZ. I think the only thing that could possibly switch out of that is if Nico is healthy, and then we have Klaus, putting Nico back below Klaus, because I love that pairing at the beginning of the season. But right now, that's a hell of a triangle.
And even Indy as well. I struggle not putting him in this 11, but I personally did not like how he did not have any winger or width to our attack last game. So I'm bringing back the wingers. And I was torn on Stroud versus Thorson. I could see that being either or on the left side, but I've got Alm coming back on my right side, and then a Denoran starting up top. And then this is all to say, this is me considering that Nico game time, they're going to play it conservative. They're not going to start him or probably even field him, especially because we're looking at Saturday as well with the S words coming. We're going to the S words this time. So it's going to be one that you got to manage because this is a week of rotation, right? Like you can't just start the same 11 both days. And if you are, that's a little risky when you have this long run of games coming up here. But this is my 11 at least that I would play if I'm Cornell. I could see him being a little more conservative, like maybe sticking with Hebert. But we'll see. Honestly, this is what I think could look like an 11 that I think could go out and win this game against Dallas.
And this is a great problem for us to have now that we're actually, I feel like this is reverse on most teams. Like we're actually getting healthier now throughout the season. Now, when we look at our bench, Klaus, Thorson, Indy, Ostrak, Celio, Yarrow, I feel like we could actually start making changes earlier in the game. I feel like we typically wait till like the 60th or 70th. We can make a halftime adjustment with some of these guys on the wings as well. Like if Stroud's not getting it done, we throw Thorson in there. So I'm not opposed to it. I'm pretty excited going forward. Let's get into predictions, Jake. I think we both have a similar feel here, but I'm actually going with a 3-0 dub. I think the offense prevails here. I think we play so much better at home. I think that they have had a stronger defense, and I'm not concerned about them scoring against us. Like you said, I'm very excited to have Nilsson and Parker back there together. You got Berkey and net. Who knows if Ferreira is even going to play? I would assume he probably will, but I'm going with a 3-0 dub. What are your thoughts?
I'm going 1-0 win, and I think that goal is going to come for us earlier on in the game, so probably in the first half, and then it's going to be tough going for the rest of the game. I'm not saying we're going to sit back on that, but I just don't see us. We struggle against some defenses that are not this astute. So I'm wondering if they're not going to give us much, and not that teams just give us things, but against a team that knows what they're doing defensively and that positional style of play is really working for them, it's going to struggle. It's going to be a struggle for any offense. So I could see us not, putting up our normal numbers against this team. Last time you were here, obviously we put up 6. So we'll see what happens here at home. But I've got 1-0 win as mine, and it's going to be a nail biter coming down to it. But lines for this game: City's at -125 currently, Dallas at +205, draw at +265. So we're the favorites heading into this one. Over is a little bit better in this game at -130 and under at +105. And I think that's probably just due to Dallas's lack of proficiency in terms of goal scoring. But I'm torn on this one on my bets, man. I kind of wanted to bet the under, but losers bet the under. So I don't think I'm going to do that. I think where I'm going to go, and I'm going to give 2 out here, I'm going to say both teams have scored no at +115. And I think we're obviously the team that scores in that situation. The other one I have is City first half money line. I think we can play both halves just fine. I'm not worried about us being just a one-sided team, but I do think the first half will be very, very important to get on the board against them. So I think this is a game that we should go out and win. We've only lost one ever first half. So I hope that we can come out and just win this first half. And that's at +140 again. So those are where my money is going for this game. How about you, Justin?
Oh man, I was just looking. I wanted to check to see if there was a such thing as a double chance for the first half. I was like,
I looked too.
For the money
I
line,
looked too.
-475. I'm not touching that.
No chance.
That's too juicy. You know where I'm going. Every time City over 1.5 goals, that is basically a lock when we were at home. I know it didn't hit last game. On the road, different story. I'm locking that -120 in. That's my biggest bet. And then something you should think about here, Jake, you have both teams to score no at +115. That's because you don't think Dallas is going to score. Dallas under a half a goal is +180. So if you want to get a little bit more legs there. So, yeah, I mean, you have a better chance there for a 0-0 tie. That's why that is dropped down a little bit. But I'm going to sprinkle a little bit on Dallas not to score at +180 as well.
I like that. I think a clean sheet would mean a lot to this team, especially in the nature that we played Dallas already this season, and coming home and cleaning up some of the defensive errors and lapses we've had the last couple of weeks, I think would mean a lot, especially, the big man between the sticks. Berkey would love a clean sheet.
We haven't had a clean sheet since Miami. Yep. So our last 4 games, we have not had a clean sheet. I think this would be a big one for Berkey, and I think it'd be huge for Nilsson's confidence as well, and Parker just getting back together there. So I think it'd be huge.
I would agree. Well, we will be back with you all on Thursday to break this game down, but hopefully everyone has a lovely night at City Park on Wednesday. Should be a beautiful one compared to all the crappy weather I feel like we've gotten there this year. So enjoy it. It's going to be a good match, one that's going to be really exciting, I think. So I'm really pumped for it. I know you are too, Justin. But we'll talk to you all on Thursday. In the meantime, all for City, man.
All for City.